3 men dragged her to a wagon. A cowboy cut the ropes and fired the gun. The sun rose slowly over the small western town of Redstone, painting the dusty streets in shades of gold and orange. The air was dry and hot, carrying the faint smell of hay, horses, and the wooden boards of the town's small buildings. For most people it was just another day, quiet and ordinary, but for Clara it held the promise of a new adventure. She stepped out of her small wooden house, tying her brown hair into a loose braid, and took a deep breath. Her eyes sparkled with the curiosity and courage that everyone in town had noticed. Clara was not like other young women. She had a restless spirit, always asking questions, always looking beyond the fences and hills that surrounded Redstone. Clara lived with her father, Mr. Thompson, a kind and patient man who ran the general store in the middle of town. The store was small but well kept, filled with sacks of flour, barrels of nails, and shelves of jars with sugar, coffee, and dried beans. Clara helped him each morning before heading to the fields where they kept a few chickens and a horse named Daisy. She was used to hard work, but she never complained. In fact, she enjoyed the small routines, the smell of fresh bread baking, the clatter of the wagon wheels on the street, the sound of laughter from neighbors passing by. This morning, like every morning, Clara carried a small basket to collect eggs from the chicken coop. She hummed softly as she walked through the yard, her fingers brushing against the tall grass and the wooden fence posts. The town was quiet. Most people were still inside, finishing breakfast or preparing for the day's work. But something felt different. A chill, barely noticeable, ran down her spine. Clara paused, listening. In the distance she heard the sound of hooves pounding on the dirt road, a sound that did not belong to any of the usual riders in town. Her curiosity pushed her forward. Clara's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the need to understand. She walked closer to the road, peering through the tall grass, and then she saw them. 3 men, rough and strong, riding in a small wagon pulled by 2 black horses. They were strangers. None of the townspeople recognized them. Their clothes were dusty and worn, but they carried themselves with a dangerous confidence. Their faces were hard and serious, and there was a sharp glint in their eyes. Even from a distance, Clara could sense the tension in the air. These men were trouble. She turned quickly, thinking of heading back home, but it was too late. The men had spotted her. One of them, taller than the rest, raised his arm and shouted something she couldn't understand. Then, before she could run, the 3 men dismounted with surprising speed. They moved like predators, quick and precise, closing the distance between them and her. Clara tried to step back, but her foot caught in the edge of the chicken coop, and she stumbled slightly. The men were upon her in an instant. "Hey, let go of me!" Clara shouted, struggling as they grabbed her arms. Their grip was firm, and she realized they meant to take her somewhere. Panic surged, but she forced herself to stay calm. Clara had faced hard situations before on the farm. Lost chickens, runaway horses, and storms that threatened the crops. But nothing like this. Her mind raced, thinking of how to escape. She kicked, pulled, and twisted, trying to free herself. But the men were strong. The tallest man grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her toward the wagon. Clara's basket of eggs fell to the ground, breaking on the dirt, and she felt a pang of anger. They had no right to take her. She yanked at the ropes that one of the men had started to tie around her wrists, feeling the rough fibers bite into her skin. "Let me go!" she screamed, her voice carrying across the empty street. Her shouts echoed, bouncing off the wooden walls of the nearby buildings, but no one came running. Redstone was usually a sleepy town. People rarely acted quickly when danger arrived. Just as the men tried to force her into the wagon, Clara noticed a flicker of movement at the edge of town. A figure on horseback was riding toward them, moving faster than any ordinary rider. Her heart leapt. The man was tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. His coat flapped in the wind as he urged his horse forward. Clara didn't know who he was, but she felt a sudden surge of hope. The strangers glanced at the approaching rider and hesitated for a moment. Clara seized the opportunity. With all her strength, she twisted free from one of their grips and darted a few steps toward the open road. The men shouted angrily, chasing her for a few paces, but the rider was already close. His horse's hooves kicked up clouds of dust, and he raised his hand, holding something shiny that glinted in the sun. Clara couldn't tell what it was, but the strangers clearly recognized it as a threat. Clara stumbled, her feet slipping on the dirt, and the men lunged to catch her. One grabbed her arm again, while another swung the rope, trying to bind her wrists. Fear surged, but she didn't give up. Clara kicked dirt into the face of the tallest man and ducked under his arm, managing to avoid the rope for a precious few seconds. She could hear the rider now, shouting something, his voice commanding and strong. The men froze, startled by the sudden arrival. The rider reached the wagon in moments, his horse stopping just a few feet away. He raised a gun, but he didn't shoot immediately. Instead, he shouted, "Let her go! Now!" His voice was calm but firm, carrying the authority of someone used to handling danger. The men hesitated, their confidence faltering. Clara's eyes met the rider's, and she felt an unspoken promise. He would not let them take her. The tallest man cursed under his breath and pulled at Clara, trying one last time to force her into the wagon. But the rider acted quickly. He drew the gun, firing a shot into the air. The sound cracked like thunder across the town, making birds scatter from the rooftops and sending a flock of pigeons into the sky. The men jumped back, startled by the loud report, and Clara took the moment to twist free completely. She ran toward the rider, her legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. The man lowered his gun, but his eyes never left the strangers. He reached for Clara, cutting the ropes that had begun to bind her with a small knife he carried at his side. The sharp leather straps fell to the ground, and Clara rubbed her wrists, feeling the sting but also relief. She was free, at least for now. The three men stared at them, their anger and frustration clear, but they did not advance. The rider's presence had changed everything. Clara looked up at the man who had saved her. His face was partially hidden by the shadow of his hat, but she could see the determination in his eyes. He spoke gently but firmly. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, unable to find words. Her heart was still racing, her chest heaving from fear and adrenaline. She realized how close she had come to a danger she had never imagined. The town was slowly waking now. Windows opened, and people peeked out from behind curtains, whispering to each other about what they had seen. Clara felt a mixture of fear and gratitude. She knew she would never forget this moment. The fear of being taken, the courage to fight back, and the stranger who had risked his life to save her. She also knew that life in Redstone would never be quite the same again. For a moment, Clara stood there, breathing heavily, feeling the wind on her face and the dust in her hair. She looked at the stranger, her rescuer, and wanted to say thank you, but the words didn't come. Instead, she simply nodded, a small gesture of respect and gratitude. The men in the wagon were moving away now, muttering curses as they disappeared down the road. Clara felt a shiver run through her, knowing they might return, but for now, she was safe. The rider sheathed his gun and tipped his hat slightly. "You should get home," he said softly. "And be careful. The world can be dangerous, but you are stronger than you think." Clara nodded again, feeling a strange mixture of fear, relief, and admiration. She watched as the man mounted his horse again and rode away, disappearing over the hill as quickly as he had arrived. Clara returned home slowly, her mind racing with questions. Who were those men? Why had they come for her? And who was the mysterious cowboy who had saved her? She could not answer these questions yet, but she knew one thing clearly. Life in Redstone was about to change, and she had glimpsed a world of danger, courage, and heroism she had never imagined. She had survived the impossible, thanks to her own bravery and the courage of a stranger who had risked everything for her. As she stepped back into the safety of her home, the morning sun shone brightly on the streets of Redstone, as if nothing had happened. But Clara knew better. She would never forget the fear, the struggle, or the strength she had discovered in herself that day. And she would never forget the cowboy who had appeared like a guardian angel, cutting the ropes and firing the gun to save her life. Clara could not stop thinking about the morning's events. Even as she worked in her father's store, stacking sacks of flour and arranging jars on the shelves. Her mind wandered back to the three strangers, the wagon and the mysterious cowboy who had saved her. Every noise on the quiet streets made her jump, and every shadow seemed to hide danger. She knew that what had happened was not random. Those men had come for a reason, and though they had been driven away, she feared they might return. By late afternoon, the town had grown busier. Farmers led their horses through the streets, merchants called out their wares, and children ran around laughing. Clara tried to focus on her chores, but her heart was still pounding. She thought of the black horses, the ropes, and the look of pure malice on the men's faces. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the counter. She felt small and fragile in the world, yet a spark inside her refused to dim. She had fought back, even for a moment, and she had survived. That small victory gave her courage. As the sun began to sink behind the hills, casting long shadows across the town, Clara decided she could not stay inside all evening. She needed to move, to breathe, to remind herself that life continued despite fear. She walked slowly toward the edge of town, carrying a small satchel with food and water. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly. Every rustle in the bushes, every crack of a twig made her flinch. Yet she pressed on. The open fields beyond the town called to her, offering a sense of freedom she had never felt in the tight streets of Redstone. Suddenly, movement in the distance caught her attention. A thin line of dust rose on the road, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her hands clutching her satchel. The dust grew closer, and soon the figures of three men appeared on horseback. Her stomach sank. It was them, the same strangers from the morning, moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the area like predators looking for prey. Clara's mind raced. They had come back. Clara turned to run, but fear rooted her to the spot for a moment. She needed a plan, any plan, to stay alive. She remembered the thick hedges behind the barn and the small creek that ran along the edge of town. If she could reach the creek, she might be able to hide, or even escape. But the men were too close now. They shouted her name, mocking her, their voices carrying across the fields. Clara knew she could not outrun them for long. She needed help. And help came, just as suddenly and dramatically as it had the morning before. From the edge of the horizon, a figure appeared on horseback, galloping fast toward her. It was the cowboy, the same man who had saved her. His hat shaded his face, his long coat flapping in the wind, and in his hand he carried a gun. Clara's heart leapt. She ran toward him, moving faster than she had ever moved in her life, and he slowed his horse just enough to meet her. The strangers noticed him immediately. Their laughter and shouts turned to curses and anger. One of the men raised a rifle, but the cowboy acted quickly. He fired a warning shot into the air, the sound sharp and commanding, echoing across the fields. The horses reared slightly at the noise, and the men faltered for a moment. Clara took advantage of the pause, ducking low and sprinting toward the cowboy. His horse moved beside her, a protective presence as if it understood the danger. "Stay close," he shouted, his voice firm but calm. Clara nodded, her chest heaving. She had no words, only trust in the man who had saved her once and now risked his life again. The men recovered from their surprise and charged forward, trying to cut her off. Clara stumbled, but the cowboy reached out, grabbing her hand and pulling her to safety. The rope straps that one man had brought with him fell uselessly to the ground. Clara realized she was free again, but this time the danger was closer, more immediate. The cowboy dismounted swiftly, drawing his gun and stepping in front of Clara. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice echoing with authority. The men hesitated, but one of them raised his rifle and fired a shot toward the ground near their feet, hoping to intimidate him. The cowboy fired 2 quick shots into the air, and the sound made the men flinch once more. Clara crouched behind him, her body shaking, but she felt a strange sense of safety. The man was not only brave, he was clever, knowing exactly how to handle the dangerous situation. Suddenly, one of the men lunged toward Clara, trying to grab her while the others distracted the cowboy. Clara twisted her body, pulling away with all her strength. She kicked dirt into the man's face and ran toward a low fence, jumping over it in one swift motion. The man cursed, chasing after her, but the cowboy was faster. He fired a warning shot that forced the pursuer to stop and retreat. Clara's heart pounded with fear and adrenaline, but she pressed on, running toward a grove of trees that marked the edge of the field. The cowboy followed closely, guiding her, keeping the men at a distance. Clara noticed that he was calm, almost entirely in control, despite the danger surrounding them. His confidence inspired her to keep moving. She remembered the creek she had seen earlier and realized that if they could reach it, she might have a chance to escape completely. The men were still angry, still determined, but now they had to think twice before crossing the open field under the cowboy's watchful eyes. Finally, they reached the edge of the creek. Clara paused for a moment, her chest heaving, water dripping from her satchel. The cowboy scanned the area carefully. "We need to make a run for the trees on the other side," he said calmly. Clara nodded, and together they sprinted across the shallow water, splashing as they ran. The men shouted behind them, but the distance was growing. The cowboy fired 2 more shots, not at them directly, but close enough to scare them and slow their pursuit. By the time they reached the safety of the thick trees, the men had lost sight of them. Clara collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive. She looked at the cowboy, who was standing tall, scanning the area for any sign of the strangers. His hat was tilted low, hiding his eyes, but she could sense his determination. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of fear, relief, and gratitude. She could not speak. Her body was too tense, her mind too full of what had just happened. The cowboy helped her to a safe spot among the trees and offered her some water from his canteen. Clara drank eagerly, her hands shaking. She realized how close she had come to danger and how lucky she was to have someone brave enough to risk everything for her. She wanted to thank him, to tell him how much she appreciated what he had done, but the words did not come. Instead, she simply looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and awe. They waited in the trees for some time, listening to the sounds of the men as they moved back toward the town. The strangers were still angry, still looking for Clara, but they had been slowed, frustrated, and scared by the cowboy's presence. Clara realized that without him, she would never have made it this far. The danger was not gone completely, but for the moment, they were safe. The cowboy finally spoke again. "We need to get you somewhere safer," he said. "These men are not finished yet, and Redstone is too small for you to hide easily." Clara nodded, too tired to argue. She trusted him completely. Together they moved deeper into the forest, careful to make as little noise as possible. Clara's mind raced with questions, but for now she focused on staying close to the man who had saved her life twice in one day. As night fell, the forest grew darker, and the sounds of the town faded. Clara felt a strange mixture of fear and wonder. She had never been outside the safety of the town at night, and the forest seemed both beautiful and dangerous. The cowboy guided her along a narrow path, moving quickly but silently. Clara followed, her trust in him absolute. She knew that whatever happened next, she was not alone. Eventually, they found a small clearing where they could rest. The cowboy built a small fire, careful not to draw attention. Clara sat near the flames, warming herself and thinking about the events of the day. She realized how quickly life could change, how easily danger could appear, and how important it was to have courage and quick thinking. She also realized the importance of kindness and bravery in others. The cowboy had risked everything to save her, and she would never forget it. As she watched the flames dance and flicker, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would never let fear control her, and she would be ready for whatever challenges came her way. She would also honor the courage of the man who had saved her, remembering that heroism often came in the form of quiet, decisive action. For now, though, she let herself rest, her body exhausted, but her spirit stronger than ever. The night in the forest was quiet, but not peaceful. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig made Clara jump. She stayed close to the cowboy, whose name she still did not know, but whose presence made her feel safe. The fire they had built cast dancing shadows on the trees, and the sound of the nearby creek was a soothing counterpoint to the tension in her chest. Her mind raced, thinking of the 3 men who had tried to take her, and she could not help but shiver at how easily danger had appeared in her life. The cowboy remained alert. He moved around the fire quietly, checking the perimeter, listening for any sign of the men. Clara watched him, noticing how calm he was, how precise in his movements. He was not just brave, he was smart. He understood danger and how to control it. For the first time, Clara felt that maybe, just maybe, they could end this nightmare for good. "We can't stay here forever," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "They know you are out here. If they find you, it will not end well. We need to get back to town, but we must be careful. The men are not ordinary. They are dangerous and desperate." Clara nodded, listening intently. She felt a mix of fear and determination. She did not want to go back to the town, not while the men were still there, but she trusted him completely. Before dawn, they began their journey back. Clara followed closely as he led her through the forest, using small paths and hidden trails. The forest seemed endless, but the cowboy knew it well. They avoided open areas, moving quietly and swiftly. Every now and then he would stop, crouch low, and listen. Clara followed his example, trying to learn from him. She realized that in moments of danger, courage alone was not enough. One had to be smart, observant, and quick. As they neared the edge of the forest, the first light of morning broke over the hills, casting a golden glow across the fields. Clara breathed in the fresh air, feeling a small sense of hope. But before she could relax, she heard the unmistakable sound of hooves pounding on the ground. Her heart leapt. The 3 men were back. They had tracked her, and they were closing in fast. The cowboy acted immediately. He grabbed Clara and pushed her behind a large boulder near the edge of the forest. "Stay down and stay quiet," he whispered. Clara pressed herself against the rock, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short bursts. From her hiding place, she could see the men on horseback, scanning the area, shouting angrily. They looked dangerous, ready to take her by force if they could. The cowboy's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. He knew he had to act fast. He moved slightly to get a better position, using the cover of trees and rocks. Clara watched, heart in her throat, as he readied his gun. He did not aim recklessly. He aimed carefully, calculating every movement. He was not just strong, he was precise, and Clara realized that this precision could save their lives. Suddenly, one of the men spotted a movement near the rock. He raised his rifle and shouted, "There! Behind the rock!" Clara froze, her fear almost paralyzing her. But the cowboy did not panic. He stepped forward just enough to fire a shot, the sound echoing across the field. The bullet hit the ground near the man, startling him, forcing him to duck. The other 2 men reacted instantly, shouting at each other, trying to regroup. Clara realized that the cowboy was not just protecting her, he was teaching her something. His calm, strategic approach gave her a sense of strength. She remembered the kicks and tricks she had used earlier and felt a spark of courage. When the cowboy gave her a small nod, she understood that it was time to help. Together, they could end this. The men advanced cautiously, but the cowboy was ready. He fired another shot into the air, startling their horses and creating confusion. Clara saw her chance. She grabbed a small stick from the ground and, using all her strength, threw it toward one of the horses, making it shy and kick backward. The man holding the reins stumbled, losing his balance for a brief moment. That was all the cowboy needed. He ran forward, cutting the ropes that still hung from the men's wagon, making it impossible for them to use it as a weapon or escape quickly. The men were furious. They shouted and cursed, trying to grab Clara, but she was now protected by both her own courage and the cowboy's skill. One man lunged forward, swinging a rope, but the cowboy fired a warning shot just close enough to scare him without causing harm. The man froze, giving Clara the opening she needed. She ran toward the trees, following the path they had taken earlier, with the cowboy close behind. The men realized they were losing control. Their confidence from earlier had vanished, replaced by fear and frustration. The cowboy used every trick he knew, covering Clara, creating noise, making the men hesitate. Clara ran, feeling a mixture of adrenaline and determination. She would not let herself be taken again. She could feel the power of standing with someone brave, someone who refused to give in to fear. They reached the creek again, the sound of rushing water soothing but also masking their movements. The cowboy signaled for Clara to follow him into the shallow water, and they moved silently, the cool water splashing softly around their legs. The men hesitated at the edge, unsure of how to cross without being targeted. Clara felt a sense of relief. For now they had an advantage, and the cowboy's plan was working. As they reached the other side of the creek, Clara noticed the three men trying to find another path. Their shouts grew frustrated, their voices angry and desperate. Clara realized that the tide was turning. The men were losing control, and she was gaining confidence. The cowboy moved beside her, guiding her quietly but firmly, and she felt a deep sense of trust. He would not let them harm her, and together they could finish this. Suddenly, one of the men charged toward them from behind a tree, attempting a surprise attack. Clara froze for a moment, but the cowboy was faster. He fired a precise shot that hit the ground near the man, causing him to stumble and fall. Clara ran past him without hesitation, following the cowboy into a dense part of the forest. The men were now retreating, frustrated and scared, realizing that they could not win against someone so skilled and determined. Finally, they reached a safe clearing. Clara collapsed to the ground, her legs weak from running, her body shaking from fear and adrenaline. The cowboy knelt beside her, checking her for any injuries. "You're okay," he said softly. "You made it." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face, a mix of relief and gratitude. She could hardly believe that it was over. The three men, the danger, the fear, it had all come to an end, thanks to him. She looked at him, really looked for the first time. His face was strong and calm, shadowed by the wide brim of his hat. His eyes were kind but sharp, alert to every movement around them. Clara realized that he was more than a hero. He was someone who understood courage, responsibility, and the value of protecting others. She felt a wave of admiration and gratitude that words could not express. The forest was quiet now. The danger passed. Clara sat on a fallen log, catching her breath, feeling the weight of the past hours. She realized how close she had come to losing her freedom, her safety, and perhaps even her life. But she also realized that she had survived, not just because of the cowboy, but because of her own determination and courage. She had fought, she had struggled, and she had not given up. The cowboy built a small fire once more, this time not to hide, but to rest. Clara sat near the flames, warming herself, still shaken, but safe. He handed her a small piece of bread and some water. "You were brave," he said quietly. "Many people would have frozen. You didn't." Clara felt a small smile cross her face. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to feel pride. She had been scared, but she had faced the danger, and she had survived. They stayed there until the sun rose fully, casting light across the forest. Clara felt a sense of peace, knowing that the immediate danger was gone. The three men were gone, at least for now, and she was alive. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to move forward despite it. And she knew that she had found a kindred spirit in the cowboy, someone who had shown her that bravery and kindness could change the outcome of even the darkest situations. Finally, the cowboy spoke again. "We should head back to town," he said. "It's safer now, and you need to be with people who can protect you. But remember, never underestimate the power you have inside yourself."
"You fought well today." Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude.
She had learned more than she could have imagined, about courage, strategy, trust, and the strength that comes from refusing to give up. Together, they began the walk back toward Redstone. The forest was no longer frightening, but alive with possibility. Clara felt a new sense of confidence, knowing that she had faced real danger and survived. And though the cowboy remained quiet, guiding her, she knew that he would always be someone she could trust, someone who had risked everything to save her life. She walked with her head held high, her heart full of relief, courage, and hope. The journey back to Redstone was quiet, but full of unspoken tension. Clara walked close to the cowboy, who guided her carefully through the forest paths. The first light of morning spilled over the hills, illuminating the tall trees and the sparkling creek they crossed again. The forest, which had seemed dark and frightening only hours before, now appeared calm and peaceful. Yet Clara could not shake the memory of the three men and the fear that had coursed through her body. She had survived, but the memory of danger stayed alive in her mind. The cowboy walked beside her, silent for most of the journey, his eyes scanning the surroundings with unwavering attention. Clara noticed the way he moved. Deliberate, careful, alert. Every step seemed to have purpose. Every glance carried awareness. She realized that he had saved her not only with his gun and strength, but with his mind. His courage was paired with intelligence, and that made him unstoppable. Clara felt a deep sense of admiration.
"Are you tired?"
he asked softly, breaking the silence. Clara shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, I'm just thinking," she admitted. The cowboy nodded, understanding that what she needed most now was not just physical safety, but the chance to process everything that had happened. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being their footsteps on the soft earth and the occasional rustle of birds in the trees. As they neared the outskirts of Redstone, Clara's heart began to pound again. The familiar buildings and streets seemed smaller, quieter, almost unchanged, yet she knew everything had changed for her. The town that had seemed safe before now felt fragile, exposed to danger that could arrive without warning. She realized how vulnerable people could be in the wrong hands, and how precious bravery and courage were in protecting the innocent. Finally, they reached the edge of town, where the streets were beginning to stir with the morning routines of the townspeople. Farmers led their horses toward the barns, merchants opened their shops, and children ran around playing and laughing. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. They were back in familiar territory, yet she felt different, stronger, braver, more aware of the world around her. She had faced real danger, survived, and learned lessons she would never forget. The cowboy looked around cautiously before motioning for Clara to continue into town. "Stay close," he warned softly. Clara nodded, walking beside him as they moved through the streets. People paused to stare, whispering among themselves. Some recognized her from the previous day's incident, and the news of the attempted abduction had already spread. The townspeople looked worried, but also impressed by the presence of the mysterious cowboy who had protected her. Clara felt a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. She did not like attention, but she knew it was because of the danger she had faced that they were looking at her this way. As they reached her home, Clara's father emerged from the small wooden store, his face pale with worry.
"Clara, you're safe!" he cried, rushing forward.
Lara ran into his arms, feeling the warmth and comfort of home for the first time in hours. "Yes, Papa, I'm safe," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. She looked up at the cowboy, who had stayed a step behind, keeping watch over her. Her father's eyes met his briefly, full of silent gratitude and respect. You saved her, Mr. Hired," Thompson said, his voice shaking. The cowboy nodded slightly, tipping his hat. "She was brave," he replied. "I just helped her along the way." Clara smiled faintly, realizing that heroism often came quietly, without seeking recognition or praise. The cowboy did not linger long. He had done what needed to be done and had ensured her safety. Now it was time for him to move on. Before he left, Clara stepped forward. "Thank you, truly," she said, her voice steady. "I don't know how I could ever repay you." The cowboy smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth crossing his face. "No need," he said simply. "Just remember what you learned today. Courage, quick thinking, and standing strong can save you when danger comes. And help others when they need it." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing into the horizon, leaving Clara with a sense of gratitude and inspiration that she would carry forever. The townspeople gathered around as Clara explained briefly how she had been rescued. Their eyes widened in awe at the story, and whispers spread quickly about the three dangerous men, about Clara's bravery, and about the mysterious cowboy who had appeared like a guardian in the nick of time. Clara felt a strange sense of pride, not from showing off, but from knowing she had faced danger and survived. She had learned that even in fear, one could act with courage, and that bravery could take many forms. Over the next few days, Clara's life began to return to a sense of normalcy, though she carried the memory of the events deeply in her heart. She resumed her chores in the store, helped in the fields, and even visited the creek where she and the cowboy had hidden. But she was different now. She was more aware of the world's dangers, yet also more aware of her own strength. She realized that fear could be transformed into action, that being brave did not mean being fearless, but moving forward despite fear. The town, too, had changed. The three men had disappeared, likely realizing that Redstone was not the place to find easy prey.
The sheriff began to organize a small search party, determined to ensure the town's safety.
Clara's father watched over her carefully, still worried but also proud. He understood that she had grown stronger from the ordeal, and he admired her courage. Clara herself felt a quiet pride. She had faced terror, survived, and learned valuable lessons about courage, trust, and resilience. In the weeks that followed, Clara would often think about the cowboy. She never learned his real name, but his actions and wisdom stayed with her. She remembered the precise way he had handled the men, his calmness in the face of danger, and the way he had trusted her to act when she could. Clara realized that heroism was not always loud or recognized. It could be quiet, steady, and decisive, changing the outcome of life in a single moment. Life in Redstone slowly returned to normal. Clara walked the streets with a new awareness, noticing the kindness and courage of those around her. She helped neighbors, shared her story with children, and even taught them small lessons about being brave in the face of danger. She carried herself differently now, head held high, eyes alert, and a quiet strength that others could see and respect. Clara understood that life would always bring challenges, but she also knew that she could face them, especially when courage and kindness guided her actions. One evening as the sun set over the hills, Clara stood at the edge of town, looking out over the fields and forests. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for her life, for the bravery of the cowboy, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. She knew that danger could appear again, but she also knew that courage and quick thinking would always be her allies. The events of the past days had changed her, but they had also strengthened her spirit, teaching her that even in the darkest moments, hope, bravery, and kindness could prevail. Clara returned home, feeling a sense of peace. The small wooden house, the general store, the familiar streets, all felt safe and welcoming. Yet she knew that her life would never be the same. She had glimpsed danger, experienced fear, and survived. She had learned lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. And though the cowboy had left, his influence remained, a quiet reminder of courage, wisdom, and the power of helping others in need. As the night fell, Clara sat by the window, looking at the stars above Redstone. She thought of the forest, the creek, and the moments when she had feared for her life. And she thought of the cowboy, who had appeared like a guardian angel, cutting ropes, firing his gun, and guiding her to safety. Clara whispered softly, almost to herself, "Thank you for showing me what courage really is." She felt a calmness settle over her, knowing that she had faced danger, survived, and grown stronger because of it. The next morning, Redstone was alive with the sounds of daily life. Clara returned to her chores, helping her father in the store and walking the streets with renewed confidence. The town had changed too. People spoke quietly of the danger that had passed, of the bravery of one young woman, and of the mysterious cowboy whose actions had saved her life. Clara listened and smiled softly, understanding that true courage often went unnoticed but had the power to change lives. And so, life continued in Redstone. But Clara was different. She carried the lessons of those days with her, the knowledge that courage was not the absence of fear, that quick thinking could save lives, and that help sometimes comes from unexpected places. She knew that she would never forget the cowboy, the three men, or the moments that had tested her so deeply. And she knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, She had the strength to face them. Clara looked out at the horizon one last time, the morning sun painting the fields in gold. She felt hope, courage, and a quiet sense of power. The world was full of dangers, yes, but it was also full of possibilities, and she would face both with bravery, kindness, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, help, courage, and heroism could appear, just when it was needed most.